She started sitting at the edge of the couch when we watched anything, knees pointed away, her laughter folding into itself like paper being creased in the dark. A quiet habit I only noticed once it was already routine. Our apartment had a sound most people don't hear until they live there long enough: the refrigerator's low hum under the distant traffic, the thin whir of the bathroom fan, the neighbor's slow footsteps above like a metronome set to doubt. Dinner went from plates clinking to cutlery pausing midair, to her phone lighting the wall beside the dining table in a pallid blue square, then face down again. A practiced art between heat and secrecy. Rain gathered on the balcony railing, tiny lenses catching the city's sodium glow. When the drops finally fell, they fell like sentences that didn't want to be said. We still did the dishes together out of muscle memory, her rinsing, me drying. A choreography learned when we were softer with time, before silence felt like a third person leaning on the sink beside us. I told myself distance happens after long years, that love breathes in and out like weather, that the empty chair by the window wasn't a symbol, just furniture. But that night she kissed my forehead while I pretended to scroll, the kiss careful, measured, like a nurse checking a pulse. Her bag already had the faint clatter of keys and something metallic, a sound I would later remember as if memory were a camera moving in slow close-up across objects we miss until they're evidence. I went to bed early, the ritual of pulling the sheet to my shoulder. The bedside lamp turned halfway so the room held onto a thin ribbon of light. She lingered in the living room, the glow from her screen touching the hallway like fog. The message tone was soft, a chime buried under rain, then another, then the silence that blooms when two people decide to be careful at the same time. There are ways you learn to breathe quieter, a childhood trick during hide-and-seek, a grown-up trick when you want to hear the truth arrive on a hinge. The front door opened a fraction, then shut. Shoes were slipped on somewhere between the couch and the threshold. Her perfume, winter bright with citrus, gathered itself like a promise about to be broken in another room. I followed the hall shadows with my ears, counted to 20 like she used to when we were playful, like we used to when we trusted the counting to bring us back together. The elevator dings were soft thunder. By the time they dissolved, the apartment felt too large for one body, the air cold where her absence had weight. I sat up and let the lamp draw a pale circle on the nightstand, my phone screen blank but heavy with the last photos of us smiling in kitchens where love still had elbows on the counter. Rain flattened the city into one surface. Headlights slid across the ceiling like thoughts that won't commit to a sentence. I walked to the living room without turning on the main light. The balcony glass was a mirror, and in it stood a man practicing not to tremble, mouth set, shoulders squared, the kind of posture you hold when you know you're about to meet a version of yourself you'll have to live with. Her laptop still warm, breathed on the coffee table. A chat window open on the corner, muted notifications stacked like quiet knocks that no longer needed sound to be loud. The name was just initials, the kind you give someone when you think secrecy is a nickname. The thread was ordinary until it wasn't, until the language changed from schedules to longing, from tomorrow to can't breathe when we stop. I scrolled the way you pick at a scab, knowing there's blood and picking anyway. A kind of self-harm dressed up as clarity. Images of places we knew, angles I recognized, cropped to omit what mattered most, us, until the omissions narrated more than any caption. The timestamps matched our empty dinners. The afternoons she said the gym was quiet. The mornings I made coffee and thought the bitterness would wake us up. When the elevator's cables sighed again somewhere deep in the building. I closed the laptop like a book you finish and wish you hadn't started. I went back to the bedroom and lay down in the shape I had left, pulled the sheet to my shoulder, and let my breathing settle into the shallow rhythm of someone faking sleep for the first time in his own home. The lock turned, footsteps softened by guilt. She paused at the doorway long enough for the hall light to spill across my closed eyes. Her phone glowed once as if it couldn't help itself. She tiptoed to her side, placed it face down, and slid under the covers, holding her breath to keep the mattress from telling the truth. In the dark, the regret smelled like rain and the night's perfume. It pressed against us without touching. I waited for the moment between heartbeats where words can slip out without breaking. Then, quiet enough to be cruel, I leaned toward her ear and let the sentence I'd been holding land with the gentleness of a hammer. I saw everything. Her face went white in the dark, a color you can feel without seeing, and her breath caught like a door on a swollen frame. Cliffhanger. She whispered my name as if it were the first apology, and then said nothing at all. Morning made liars of shadows. What the night hid, the gray light returned without judgment, setting the coffee steam and the undone bed in the same frame. She sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug she didn't drink. watching the rain bead and travel down the glass like it was demonstrating gravity just for us. I moved like someone playing the part of himself, open the cabinet, take the filter. Measure the grounds, each action, a metronome meant to keep panic from improvising. We didn't say good morning. The room already had a script, and our lines were silence. Who is he? Broke from me almost politely. The way you ask for directions in a city you've always lived in, but suddenly can't recognize. She closed her eyes like the answer was behind them, then let out a breath that sounded like a safe opening. A contractor, she said, and the word felt dry, administrative, as if naming him could file the feeling under expenses. From the office, I asked, already knowing the answer by the way her shoulders lifted as if to protect her throat. Nods can be apologies if you're close enough to read what they're trying to say. This one said history, boredom, small kindnesses that turned into secrets because they weren't shared. I rinsed the sink for longer than necessary. The water had the soft percussion of a scene that refuses to cut. Was it me, the kind of question that wants to be punished? A question that turns the mirror toward the person who stayed. She met my eyes then, a collision without movement, and shook her head, tears gathered but not released, the meniscus of breaking. It was loneliness, she said, choosing the word like it might forgive both of us if handled gently. I thought of our empty chair by the window, how often I had sat across from it pretending it was waiting, not accusing. The phone on the table vibrated. She flinched and didn't reach for it. Distance sometimes looks like restraint when it's really fear of being seen. Will you stop? I asked, and my voice startled me, too calm, as if anger were a luxury we couldn't afford in a room with thin walls. Yes, she said too quickly, then slower. Yes, like she wanted to match the speed of truth to a pace that wouldn't trip. Grief did not arrive like a storm. It arrived like a watermark, raising itself quietly on every surface until everything was gently ruined. Days folded into a kind of routine where we became roommates with wedding photos, swapping schedules via notes left on the counter, signing them with first initials as if we were colleagues with polite obligations. I found traces the way you find a song stuck in your head. A receipt with 2 cappuccinos on a Tuesday, a rideshare map paused near a hotel with too many conference rooms. Her sweater held a scent that wasn't mine, a cologne with cedar and something cool like mint. Small details become instruments when all you have is listening. Sleep turned to shallow water. I floated on top of hours without sinking into rest, every creak of the building a narrative proposing itself as proof. I didn't check the messages again. Restraint felt like the only dignity I had left that didn't require her participation. Instead, I ran in the rain, the city's breath on my face, traffic as metronome, each footfall a small argument for staying alive inside a story that wanted me to disappear. At night, I sat with a notebook and wrote down facts like a detective who knows the case won't end with an arrest. Dates, shifts in tone, the day she started wearing lipstick for just errands. The other man became less a person than a shadow with habits. He texted early. He liked sending photos of ceilings and coffee cups. He never used punctuation that sounded like commitment. I imagined meeting him, the conversation plain and humiliatingly courteous. So you're the contractor, so you're the husband. Any recommendations for patching holes that don't take paint? But I didn't call him. Some disasters deserve to remain abstract, their edges softened by not assigning them eyes. One night the elevator groaned and stopped on our floor, the sound lodging under my skin. I waited for our lock to turn and prepared my face like a set being dressed for a scene I didn't audition. She didn't come home. The night stayed long. The couch felt like it remembered us better than we remembered ourselves. In the morning, she was at the table again, the rain newly washed, the city pale and honest. She looked at me with a softness I had forgotten and said, I told him it's over. The word over is a bridge that leads to land you don't yet trust. I stood on it and listened for its creak. Cliffhanger. Can we try? She asked, and the coffee between us steamed like breath on a winter pane, neither of us moving to clear it. She came back differently, carrying groceries in both hands like tribute, setting them down with a care that wasn't about eggs. She moved through rooms as if touching them could apologize for what absence had already said. I noticed the small changes that try to announce big ones. Phone in the bedroom drawer, not the pocket. Calendar shared without me asking. A new habit of narrating her day in simple present tense. I'm going to the store. I'm calling my mother, as if verbs could hold us together. We decided to try dinners again. The first night she made pasta and forgot the salt. We ate it anyway, swallowing blandness like penance. Conversation found us inside doors. Neighbor's dog, the new mailbox key, a movie we'd both pretend to have liked before this version of us was invented. Under it all was the quiet hurt shaped like a missing molar. The tongue cannot help returning to what's been taken. I ended it, she said again, and I wanted to ask if ending means anything when memory keeps looping, a projector that won't shut off even after you cut the power. Instead, I asked for timelines like a bureaucrat of grief. When did it start? When did it feel real? When did you know it was wrong beyond the theory? She answered slowly, not to edit, but to keep breath. There were months, and then a night, and then all the small decisions that become a life you don't recognize until someone whispers from the dark. We tried therapy in the living room, chairs angled, a video call mediator whose voice had the calm of a late-night radio host. We spoke in turns like weather. Trust, we learned, is not rebuilt by apology alone. It is rebuilt by the boring faithfulness of days that don't ask to be praised. But the body remembers. When she touched my shoulder, a part of me flinched a fraction. A muscle taught a new reflex by a door that opened once at midnight. I hate what I did, she said, tears finally spilling, and I believed her the way you believe rain is wet. Belief didn't make me less cold. We took walks with umbrellas that clicked open like stage directions. The city smelled cleaned and ironed. We passed a playground where a swing moved by nobody, and both of us watched it for too long. There were good nights where we laughed and for a second forgot our lines. There were nights we lay back to back and felt like polite strangers renting a bed month to month. I read about forgiveness the way some people read about travel, tracing routes I wasn't sure my legs were ready. She began leaving notes in small handwriting on the fridge. Thank you for coffee, got your favorite bread, I'm here. Once I found a note tucked under my pillow. You deserved better than the person I was. I held it like something fragile that cuts anyway. The other man became a ghost we weren't supposed to speak with. Still, sometimes a bus went by with an ad for tools, and I felt a stupid, disloyal fury at hardware. One evening the building lost power. Candles pulled the room into warm ovals. She told me the story of how her father used to fix radios for neighbors, patient hands finding what was loose and soldering it quiet. I thought I could fix myself that way, she whispered, by being seen by someone who didn't know the broken parts yet. I wanted to tell her I still saw the original blueprints. Instead, I asked if she was staying because of us or because of guilt. Sometimes the difference is a tide only the shore can feel. Her answer was a long look that landed on the wedding photo, then on the empty chair, then on me. Because I love you, she said, and love sounded like a house with new paint over old water damage. We slept that night with our hands touching like a treaty too new to frame. At dawn, light laid itself like forgiveness across the floorboards, and for a moment the apartment was a place we hadn't ruined. Then her phone lit up, unknown number. 3 times, the past pressing its face against the glass, just to remind us it had the building's address. Cliffhanger. She turned the screen toward me and said, "Do you want me to answer?" And somewhere in the hallway, the elevator sighed. Morning made room for courage. It always does when the city is quiet and the coffee is honest and the rain has finally run out of new ways to apologize. We didn't answer the call. She blocked the number. The act felt both ceremonial and insufficient, a ribbon cut for a building not yet constructed. We cooked eggs and burned the toast. The smoke alarm blinked red but didn't wail, a small mercy or a metaphor if you're in the mood. She reached for my hand without performing it. I let her, and in that contact was every version of us, beginning, middle, the bridge with the missing planks. We sat by the window with our knees touching and made a list of what stays and what goes. It felt like packing even though we weren't moving yet. What stays? The plant that refuses to die. Sunday runs, the dent in the couch shaped like our perseverance. What goes? The late-night secrecy. The version of ourselves that pretended distance wasn't a language. The bad story I told myself where I was unlovable because she was unfaithful. By noon the rain returned lightly, not insistently, a reminder that the sky, too, has habits it can't break all at once. "I can leave," she said. Not as threat but as offering, the sentence folded clean with both edges aligned. "I don't want to punish you," I said, hearing how small the word punish sounds compared to what absence can do. We talked in a circle until the circle began to look like a decision. Sometimes acceptance is a letting go that happens with both hands holding the same rope, then releasing at the count of 3. In the afternoon, we took down some photos and left others. We kept the ones where we looked at each other like an answer, not a question. I packed a small bag, shirts, books, toothbrush, as if rehearsal could make leaving feel less like breaking and more like choosing. She sat on the bed, hair damp from a shower that lasted too long, eyes swollen in that way you only get from telling the truth over and over. "I want you to be happy," she said. I wanted to be angry that the sentence was so ordinary. Instead, I felt the old tenderness land one last time and sit quietly. We walked through each room together like we were saying goodbye to a neighbor we liked, but didn't really know. The rooms echoed, but gently. At the door, she held my wrist. I could feel the pulse we learned to count in the early years, when sleep meant nothing and love meant time was just a suggestion. "I'm sorry," she said, and the apology felt different now, not like an eraser, more like a label you apply so you don't confuse the box. "I forgive you," I said, and forgiveness felt like morning light, warm but not a promise of the. I left the keys on the console. They made the small sound of a scene ending without credits. Outside, the air was clean enough to taste. Traffic hummed its neutral song. A man across the street watered a plant like the day hadn't learned our names. I walked without destination until the city arranged itself into a kind of map that said, "You are here and here is not the past." At a cafe, I ordered coffee and didn't add sugar. The bitterness felt like a teacher with a soft voice and high standards. I sat by the window, an empty chair across from me reflecting back the shape of what I let go, and for the first time in months, the emptiness wasn't an accusation. When the rain finally stopped, the street shone like the inside of a seashell, and the morning lifted its quiet to a higher key. Quiet moment. I texted her one line, "Be kind to yourself," and watched the cursor blink, then put the phone face down and let the silence be the answer. Cursor blink, then put the phone face down and let the silence be the answer.